Okay, we are going to get started in just a moment with Q&A, but before we do, I had seen some more elected officials come in, and I'm not going to start introducing you because I'll probably miss some, but there was one in particular who could not make it tonight, but he contacted me this morning and asked that I share his statement with you. Mr. Larry Henry is the chairman of the Hamilton County Commission, and he sent me a statement this morning that he wanted me to read to each of you. It goes as this: the track record of the UAW clearly illustrates that they are not a friend to free market, nor are advocates for labor. They have only distracted and misled. We have an investment in VW that must be protected for the good of the taxpayer as well as the workforce. So if you have any questions with Mr. Henry, I'm sure when he's back in town he'll be glad to chat with you about that. Now, what we would like to do at this point is open up the floor, but we're going to have a few ground rules because there's a lot of people here, and I'm sure there may be a lot of questions and or comments. So to give everyone ample opportunity to engage, we have 4 simple rules. The first rule is we have a 1-minute time limit for your comment or question, and when you ask your question, address it to whichever of the guests that you would like to speak on. Secondly, we want to use decent language, so I'm assuming that will be not a problem here. There's a third requirement. Mr. Greg Jester, who is right over here, he's going to hold onto the microphone at all times, and he's going to stand right here in the middle aisle. And then finally, he's asked, because he's a happily married man, that you not touch his hand or the microphone, okay? So he'll hold that. So with that, if you have a question that you would like to address to our panel here, if you would just come to the middle right here, and we'll bring the microphone to you and you can address your question.
Thank you, Mark. If you've got a question, just line up. I'm just going to stand here.
Dan.
I hold the mic. We don't want a lot of speechifying going on here. This way I can just pull it back on.
I thought I haven't had the opportunity to have a conversation with anyone about this thought, but considering automobile production in our country and our history of the Big Three, with UAW losing over 70% of its membership, would any of y'all consider this thought of mine? They lost that membership because the workforce employed by the Big Three is so much lower because the union's making the workforce less efficient. They've outsourced the production of all of the components of the automobile. And so the Big Three, all that's left is they're really assembly plants, and they're not making most of the components of the cars anymore.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The problem of efficiency is an important one. I think anytime you drive up production costs, you're going to force a company to make really painful decisions, and one of those decisions is going to be, how can I farm out what I could do here otherwise because I can't afford to do it here anymore? And I think UAW costs have definitely contributed to that sort of thing. Yeah.
Maybe one more comment too is when you really compare the automotive business and you look at the manufacturing facilities, the majority of the parts are supplied parts. So there's really not a big decision about outsourcing this, insourcing that. So it's really very common. Somewhere between 75 to 85% is outsourced, and the rest is mainly assembly plant. That's pretty much the same with all the OEMs.
Make a comment on this too. The companies to whom parts manufacturing is outsourced are in more cases than not themselves represented by the UAW. You know, Delphi, which has a parts division of General Motors, represented by the UAW. When General Motors wanted to sell it off, UAW strenuously objected to that, but it had to be done. I want to make this comment too. Those of you who are my age, 77 or older, may remember when you were a teenager perhaps, the number of car choices that were available to you. Now step back. Today, in the year 2013, there are more car brand choices available to you than were available to you when you were a teenager. That's called competition. And in that environment, an institution which depends upon monopoly, which is what the UAW does depend upon, cannot survive. That's the new world, competition.
Thank you. I want to answer you. I had $200 to spend on my first car, so there wasn't much available at that time, and there'd be nothing today. Go ahead.
Well, my question is addressed to the professor also. I'm thoroughly confused about the difference between the Work Council and the UAW. It seems from what you read in the newspapers, the Volkswagen was all for the Work Council. Now, how could they be for that if the Work Council interjects itself between the employee and the management? Also, how could they want that if you can't have a Work Council without a union being in place? I'm confused.
Again, it's not speaking for Volkswagen, so I'll make that clear. But again, as what I tried to explain, and I think also Charles tried to explain, is it's the way of doing business in Germany. It's the only way of doing business. So in so many, you think about the manufacturing in North America, a lot of the unions around the world, Japan, Europe, whatever, they visit us here in North America and they wonder, wow, how can you run this plant so efficiently, motivated team members without a works council or a Japan union or whatever? And it's different. So again, that's the only way they know of doing business, and that's the way of doing business, but they would like to have the co-determination style here also. I didn't answer your question so well.
I have the impression, and I hope to be corrected about this if I'm wrong, that the story that first appeared in the Times Free Press about this whole issue of the UAW seemed to be coming from the German Works Council in Germany itself, indicating that given that this VW facility is the only VW facility in the world that does not have the German-style Works Council, there is perhaps some political power at play here, causing the German Works Council to say, we will have one there, but by the way, we know American labor law, you have to have a union first. So what is really being sought here, the union has become just a handmaiden, if not something tackier than that, but still. The Works Council is the key.
It's amazing what you can say when you're 77.
Oh, I love being old because I can get away with murder now. Get away with everything.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. I got here a little late and I may have missed it. Forgive me if you mentioned it, that I didn't hear it. It just came across the wire that Detroit took bankruptcy 2 hours ago. Did that get mentioned? I apologize, I didn't hear that.
Yes, it did.
My question is, do we really want to be another Detroit? I don't think so.
That's the question we ask in our pamphlet, which we've been passing out and which is available on our work site, workplacechoice.org. Chattanooga, the next Detroit, question mark. It's an excellent question.
I was commissioned by the Heartland Institute in 1995 to do an in-depth economic analysis of Detroit. Now, I happen to have a mole in the Detroit City Finance Department, so that individual fed to me all the economic data that was generally kept from the public. So I went to work on that, had a couple of colleagues work with me on it. Here's the end result of it. I found that just by adopting known competitive contracting procedures employed in other cities, privatization if you wish, that Detroit could save each year a sum of money which was greater than what its current property taxes were. So big hit in Detroit. I was on the news, giving speeches, they're all over the place. The question that came to me was this: will Detroit do this? I said, no. Why? Because what has happened over the years is that a political system has evolved in Detroit, which amounts to essentially a parasitic feeding upon itself, and eventually it kills the host. That's what Detroit has come to. I disagree with my colleagues here. It's not just the UAW, it's a host of other things as well. But basically what it is political parasite behavior. That's what killed Detroit.
This is a question for the professor. I think I may have misunderstood it, so I'd like a bit of clarification. I have several friends from Germany and in some other countries, and they are also a member of the Works Council. I have friends from Daimler and Volkswagen, and I'm a little confused because from what I can understand from them, the Works Council, yes, has a large voice, but the CEO, which I believe is Dr. Winterkorn of UAW, he has two votes that he can trump. And maybe that's not correct, but they do have a say. The union is the union in these situations. And by the way, I think all of Volkswagen plants are union, not just Works Council, but they're union in the entire world, except for here in Chattanooga. But I believe that the Works Council works with the company. But when there is an impasse, I believe the CEO, whomever it may be, would be could trump.
I'm sure that's true, and I have no doubt about that. The German model is unique to Germany. And here you have a different model. It is determined by American labor law. And quite frankly, the two do not mesh well. So one of the two would have to give. I don't know which one would.
Your comments are exactly right. And again, I may be off on the number, but my understanding is there's 21 people on the Board of Management. 10 of those individuals are part of the Works Council. 10 of those are members on the board for various areas. And Winterkorn does have the final deciding vote. So it is, when there's an impasse, he has an opportunity. Right.
There's still some contract workers working at the plant here in Chattanooga, and I was wondering, what do you speculate would happen to them if a union came to this plant?
Again, I'm only talking about generalities of what's happened in the past and what was maybe the overview in the future. Typically, when the OEMs start up a new plant, you know, you can imagine the hiring curve is so steep between first shift and second shift. And then we really want to form, towards the end of that hiring, a temporary pool. And the idea is once that decision is made by the OEMs, and again, this is typical models that's been used in the last 5 or 10 years, the idea is those temporaries or variable workforce, these people this is the only way that people in the future can be hired. So the idea is there's a win-win. Yeah, we need a variable workforce in the companies to have some fluctuation. When attrition happens or when people decide not to work there, when there's -5, you get to hire 5. So the idea is we continue to grow with that. And I think your real question is, would they be considered in the bargaining unit or being able to vote? And that's really at the time that the petition to the NLRB, it's a discussion point always. Are these employees really employed? Are they really still here? Are these temporaries? It's really a decision point. It's really another bargaining chip at the table, to be honest.
My real question is if they're going to get to keep their jobs. That comes down to.
Yeah, I hope so. That's all I can say. Yeah.
I had one comment, and that's the gentleman who worked for Volkswagen and Toyota. My father's a World War II veteran, and I lost an uncle in Europe, and I have a hard time with anybody saying that Germany was a developing country in 1945. They really beat the entire world.
So I apologize if I offended you, but I guess the point I was trying to make, and that maybe I misspoke, is after the war, you know, a lot of people were not treated properly in that time frame. And my understanding in the literature, and again, the professor is more the expert, is when the actual unions helped to support the overall workers in the workforce. So I apologize for that.
I have a question. Since I'm a non-auto worker and just a resident here, what can I do to prevent the union from coming in? If there anything can be done, that's for any one of the speakers.
Well, I think the best thing that you can do, and I would recommend this for everyone, is just get informed. You know, these are the types of facts that I think everyone in this town should know. And if you learn something that you think is important that someone else should know, whether they're a factory worker or whether they're your neighbor or a church member, tell them. You know, we've created a website, workplacechoice.org. We have all this information up for people to read. It's open for everybody. So I would just say get the facts. That's the best thing that you can do. Just know what's happening in your community.
One other thing, there are a couple of clipboards that are being passed around right now. They've just started, and there's a place for you to put your contact information down if you want us to keep you informed on other opportunities like this, to bring other people out to hear more information, or if you want to receive by email and so forth. So if you're interested in that, please just jot your name and contact information down, and we'll keep you informed.
The percent of workers in America who are members of a union as of this past year, 2012, it's about 12% of workers are members of unions. Now, if you pull from those data, those individuals who are employed by government at various levels, so that you have the total non-government, what we might call the private for-profit sector, you have a smaller percentage of the labor force in that private for-profit sector that are members of a union, than we had in the year 1900. Students of labor economics and labor history often swallow hard and come to this conclusion. Unions were essentially a 20th century phenomenon who have been rendered increasingly less relevant because of one thing: market competition for final products. And that's not going to go away.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Don, I appreciate your background in this question. Would you recommend that management regularly engage with their team regarding these issues of union in a way that's constructive, knowing there are people on both sides of this issue, but in a way that would foster trust, but be able to answer questions, understand concerns, but that's effective and constructive?
Yes, that's one of the points I was trying to make in my presentation, is that the supervisors really need to have the facts. They need to be able to answer the questions directly. I think honestly, from my past experience versus the current situation here at Volkswagen, it's very difficult for the supervisors in some regards. You heard the questions about the work council and you heard about the union, so I think it's a very difficult situation. The NLRB rules and also management rules of how to manage and not to, again, tips and faux, as we call them as supervisors. We can't threaten, we cannot interrogate, et cetera, et cetera. So again, management's waiting for the team members to ask the questions. Typically what happens is the pro-union people are working behind the scenes, unfortunately stirring up unnecessary type comments. And once those things are brought to the fact, they are answered directly. And if you remember, when I was there, we did answer it directly in the plant. But again, as I said, the supervisor's job, it's the most difficult job in the world. I mean, I had that job for a long time myself. You know, they have, oh wow, 3 people didn't show up today. Oh wow, somebody got sick on the line. I got to make sure I get the quality improvement I need to do this week. So they're trying to do their daily business, and you got, you know, Susie or Frank over here trying to stir up the pot saying, hey, we need a union, what do you think? So it's a difficult job, but please, the people that want to ask the questions, ask the tough question. Ask them directly, it's good.
It looks like we only have 2 more people in line, so those will be the last 2 questions.
Something I didn't hear mentioned tonight was how the effect of getting a union in this area will affect not just Volkswagen, but all the suppliers in the area. If it's not from Volkswagen being shut down by the union or stopped by the union, they'll unionize the suppliers along the way too, and one supplier out of the loop shuts the whole plant down. And I didn't hear that mentioned. If you have any comments on that, I'd appreciate them.
Yeah, it's a great point. Actually, I just wrote an article with my co-author at CEI about Packard back in the 50s and how they were sabotaged at multiple levels of their supply line by strikes. It's a serious concern, absolutely.
Yes, typically in my past, that's exactly how it works. You have, there's activity for the OEM directly, and there's also activity for the suppliers. And again, if it's every supplier is important with the just-in-time and the lean systems, so they can, the union can impact you by the supplier situation. So typically what happens, the suppliers have their own programs, they have their own ways of managing their business, but at the same time, they have to be very positive employee relations also.
I'll make one more comment about suppliers. The big suppliers, Dana, Eaton, Borg Warner, the people that make the heavy stuff, the big stuff, will tell you, as they have told me over the years, that their biggest rival is their customer, because they were selling to General Motors or Ford or Chrysler. And those companies could, if they chose, make the parts for themselves. Now that adds tremendous competitive discipline on to the supplier to be able to provide the product at a quality product at a better price than the company would have to incur in cost to make it for himself. It's a very competitive business that way, but it's all linked. So if the final customer is hurt, the hurt spreads through the system.
I apologize if I poorly paraphrase any quotes from this evening, but if the Works Council has been quoted as saying without a Works Council model of some sort, we can't expand or receive another model, what then do we do? Do we bite the bullet and unionize? Or can we come up with something else? Or are we simply supposed to thrive off of a single model?
Now, I'm going to ask you to comment on that, but I found the whole Works Council commentary in the paper to be extremely interesting, because there was implied in its statement this: back home in Wolfsburg, headquarters for Volkswagen, we're looking at Chattanooga, there's no Works Council there. And there had better be one there, or we're going to use our clout to crimp that activity in some way. If you get a union, we'll come in and everything will be fine. So I think there is something going on here behind the door that I can't see through. But since you're a VW guy and you're able to see behind the door, maybe you have a thought about that.
Yeah, I don't know what's behind the door anymore, but to be honest with you, it's a very tough situation, tough question. But as I mentioned earlier, the overall board of management, there's several areas they really look at to make the decision. Is the plant competitive? Do they have a good workforce? What's the quality been in the past? Have they met their ramp up? Again, Chattanooga has checked all the boxes. Yeah, there's things to improve, and the team continues to step up to improve them. The board of management, all 21 of them, or whatever exact number, but there's one odd number, the team will make the best decision. And it will not, and it's only in my opinion, I have no insight on this, but it will not be totally based whether we have a union or not. So I think Chattanooga's ready. I don't have any vote into this. I think we're ready to bring the product here, but it's up to the officials in Germany.
Let me give one other comment on that point. Here's one thing to consider. 5 years ago, VW wasn't here. Today they are. 5 years ago, you didn't have a job with VW. Today you do. We know from past record the modus operandi for UAW. We know what happens when the UAW gets involved. Now, you don't know whether they will bring the SUV here, but you do know, based on past history, what can happen in the future with UAW. So do you want to roll the dice on something that is nebulous, that may or may not happen, or do you want to roll the dice on something that you can pretty well predict what's going to happen? For me, I know what I would roll the dice with. The best predictor of what will happen in the future is what you can predict from the past. And you can tell that about yourself. You know how you operate. You can look at your past and know what you're going to do in the future. I would contend for you VW employees, take that into strong consideration and look at UAW's past and use that to predict when you go in to determine whether you sign that card or not. You can predict that. You can't predict this other, but you've heard what Don has said about that. And you do have a job with VW now, a good job from what I understand from many of you, and you're very happy with that. It's a very good opportunity. Now, a couple of other things we want to wrap up here. That sign-up sheet's going around. Please sign that up, sign on there. We'd love for you to be involved. There have been some costs to setting up this event, and you would probably expect us to ask for some money. There are some canisters outside. If you would please contribute. We've had security costs and printing costs and so forth, promotional costs. So if you would help us defray this, the cost of this event, that would be helpful. And then also, Matt is going to share just another quick comment about workplacechoice.org. Some of you, there was the one question, well, what can you do? My suggestion to you is, first of all, you came in here with an opinion. Hopefully you're leaving with more information, new information. Share that with someone. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing that with someone, go to this website, workplacechoice.org, and Matt's going to show you in a minute a little bit of information on that. But that's a place that you can direct people to get some facts and figures on what we've talked about here tonight. Finally, the organization that I spend a lot of my time with, the Chattanooga Tea Party, we meet generally this night every month, the third Thursday of every month. So next month, our meeting won't be here, but next month, our meeting, we are having U.S. Representative Congressman Chuck Fleischmann as our speaker. So if you're interested in hearing what he has to say about what all is going on in D.C., please come and hear him. And now I'm going to let Matt wrap up with a couple of things, and then we'll be dismissed. So if you can just hang on to about 2 or 3 more minutes.
So I just wanted to comment on a flyer that's been passed around. It was on a lot of cars. Does anyone have that? It didn't come from us. It says, do we have a copy here? Here it is. So this is something that's been passed around by union supporters. A lot of you may have got it. It says, don't be fooled. Tonight's event by the Washington, D.C.-based Workplace Choice. Well, first of all, Workplace Choice is a website, not an organization. It's a staged event. It's an attempt to smear the UAW and other unions. This group is planning to provoke a negative incident for the TV cameras and other media. I just want to tell you that's a falsehood. The only thing we're interested in provoking here is honest debate and hopefully some thought. And so I want to thank you all for coming and for inviting me to your town once again. I've really had a great time, so give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah, everyone. And I think Mark's going to try to bring up Workplace Choice. I want to show you where you can go on the website to find all the information that we have on the UAW, all the articles we've written for the Times Free Press and Forbes and other great publications. Keep talking. Do you guys want to hear a joke?
No, I want to say something about the UAW. Of all the unions in America, the UAW has been the cleanest. It has been the most upfront and the most honest. There was an issue during my Michigan years in which, reported in both major newspapers, that it was observed that GM employees' wives had more hysterectomies performed than did any other women of the same age category. Now, it's because you had first dollar, no cost health insurance, which meant you went to the doctor said, gee, I think you need a hysterectomy, and I do it, and he builds the insurance, and he's well off, and there you go. I called UAW, and I got in touch with the person who's in charge of that. I said, is there a problem? She said, there's a horrible problem, and we've been trying to get our members to know that they don't have to have these things just because the doc says you have to have it. So, to me, that was incredibly honest. I applaud the UAW, but what I'm saying as an economist is, those days are over. That's the whole thing.
So a union shop steward approaches her members and says, members, good news. We've completed negotiations with management. We have a new contract. Pay raises across the board 20%. We no longer have to pay anything for our health benefits. And we only have to work on Friday. What? Comes a voice from the back. Every bloody Friday. That's all I got, Mark. That's my material. Sorry, folks.
Well, speaking of bloody, the bloody homepage is not coming up. So, but our internet signal is not working too well in here. But if you go to workplacechoice.org, there's a tremendous amount of material there. So don't forget that. You have it on the flyer that you that was given to you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Spread the word, and we'll stay around for any further questions. Thank you.